Get started. Okay, I will talk. Computer is on me. Camera. All right, here we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, I'm going to ask how you're doing, but I know it's going to be pretty good.
Do you know that because I'm wearing my Cheez-It Bowl pullover from the Cheez-It Bowl we went to last fall? Is that why? Because that's my tip off to the world. When I'm wearing my Cheez-It Bowl pullover, it's always going to be a good day.
That's when you walk. You got real big strides walking down the sidewalk. Oh, that guy's having a good day. And then you see the Cheez-It pull over. You're like, that's definitely a guy having a good day.
Yeah, the soundtrack in my head every time I wear this is I'm strutting down the street. You can't tell by the way.
All right.
That's enough. That's enough of that.
Can you do that in your Australian accent?
I mean, I could. How do you strut with an Australian accent? That's the real question.
I meant the singing, the Bee Gees. I won't force our listeners to go through that. So, Tom, the Big Ten unveiled the 2020 football schedule for technically a third time, only the second time in the past 6 weeks or so. So, hold on to this one, grasp it in your hands, and don't let go. But we got it. We know it, and I think we should talk about it. The best thing I've seen so far is Ohio State will open up at home against Nebraska. Somebody on Twitter mentioned that this is Nebraska being caught with, the Big Ten catches Nebraska smoking, a cigarette, and now is making them smoke the entire carton by having them play Ohio State right out of the gate in Columbus. And maybe there is a little bit of that, but, I think it's very fitting that it's Ohio State and Nebraska to start the season. I may have said this on this show. I said it on the message board. I've said it on a YouTube show. Like, there is no way the Big Ten is going to open with Nebraska and Ohio State, because everybody's going to talk about how those two programs saved the Big Ten season, and the Big Ten doesn't want that storyline out there for anybody to latch onto. And so I was completely surprised that it was Nebraska, Ohio State right out of the gate, because it makes so much sense, and that is why I did not expect it.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a game when there's going to be a whole lot of narratives around both of those programs. So I guess get it out of the way early. It makes sense from a sticking it to Nebraska perspective, but yeah, in terms of handling the PR of this and making, shaping the narrative around the season, that is going to very much make this the, hey, these are the teams that told you were stupid, and it turns out they were right bowl. And I guess we shouldn't be super surprised that the Big Ten may be handling the PR surrounding this incorrectly. It wouldn't be the first time, but that's going to be a fun game. As soon as I saw that, I thought, how there's the tradition of Nebraska fans applauding the visiting team when they don't boo the opponent, they cheer the opponent. I think you might have that at Ohio Stadium with, it's probably only going to be largely Ohio State football parents there, but I think that's going to be a pretty warm and cordial environment in the horseshoe that day for Nebraska.
I agree. So I guess we'll just go ahead and go through the entire Ohio State schedule real quick, and then we can break it down further. So they will open at home with Nebraska. Then October 31st, go to Penn State. Although we should say the weekend of these dates, because there are no Friday games announced yet, even though it seems like there will be Friday games. So all of these dates may change by a day here and there. It sure seems like Ohio State's won't, based on Ohio State's own website right now.
Well, the news release from Ohio State says, quote, special date games such as Friday games will be determined and announced at a later date. So
good job reading the release.
Yes. Well, thank you. We all have our role here.
Is that a shot at me? It feels like a shot at me.
No,
clearly
I'm just
it's a shot. No, it's the truth. It is the truth. Okay, October 31st at Penn State, then home against Rutgers for recovery week, then at Maryland, then home against Indiana, then at Illinois November 28th, at Michigan State December 5th, and then home against Michigan December 12th. And I don't know how aware other people are of how cold Illinois and Michigan State are during the football season. But I can only imagine November 28th in Champaign or December 5th in East Lansing, because those places are cold and snowy and rainy and whatever in October. I don't know that I've been to a Michigan State game that hasn't had snow or frigid temperatures. And like when we're in the press box looking out at the campus and then the pool area right behind the stadium, it's like there's always snow. Always walking back to the car at like 10 o'clock at night or 2 in the morning, and it's like got to be careful because there's ice and at least the place has been salted. I don't even know if we'll be able to go, but those games are going to be kind of miserable.
That was one of the first things I texted you was back-to-back weeks at Champaign after Thanksgiving and at Michigan State the first week of December. The last time we were up at Michigan State was 2 years ago. That was, I think, the first week of November. It snowed. It was about 20 degrees, and it was windy when we were walking in. That is probably the coldest I've been at an Ohio State game, at least in the last 5 years, maybe ever. I mean, that was real cold. This is a month after that, because I don't know if people realize Michigan State's not like right on the border with Ohio. It's up a little ways. You're a good hour north into Michigan, and it gets pretty chilly up there. So yeah, that's going to be a cold one. And even if it's 50 degrees in Champaign with the wind chill there, the wind chill will be about 12. So yeah, that one's going to be a little cold as well. I won't be totally devastated if due to press box space constraints and stadium constraints, we're not able to attend one or both of those games. That wouldn't be the most devastating thing I'd ever heard. I'm still hoping. I would love to go to all of the games this year. We still don't know exactly what that access is going to be like. But yeah, I mean, if I had to miss one of those would probably be towards the top of my list of like, yeah, I'm gonna keep my powder dry and
what about that?
Save it for another week.
And we're going out of order here, but the trip to Maryland, would you rather do the trip to Illinois or the trip to Maryland?
I've never actually been to Illinois before. I've been to Champaign, but I've never actually seen a game there. That's one of the few campuses I've never seen a game at. So, I mean, I think the caliber of game is going to probably be fairly similar, but Maryland, they should win by more just because Maryland's bad, and also it doesn't have the weird Champaign juju that happens to Ohio State every time they play there. So, yeah, I guess I would like to cross Illinois off my list, but yeah, I don't know that there's a right answer there.
Yeah, you're like, yeah, like you collect diseases. Yeah, I've never had bubonic plague, but I do guess I do need to cross that off my list. So I guess let's go ahead and do that one. It's like, Tom, it's just road trips. All right, it's fine. Although Illinois, if they say we can't go, the security there, in my experience, is so lax that we could just walk in and go anywhere we want, because we've been in there before where they're just like, hey, you guys want to see something? And then they wave you into the stadium. You're like, what's going on? It's like, oh, there's a football game. They don't care. They don't care. It's Illinois. Tom, let's talk about the schedule. Week 2 at Penn State. Halloween. 110,000 fans in the stadium. Ish. At night-ish. Probably noon. If you're going to play Penn State on the road during a pandemic is probably the best time to do it.
2020 hasn't worked out great for a lot of things, but in terms of playing at Penn State, friends,
yes,
this is the year to do it.
But doing it in week 2, that's a pretty quick turnaround. You're going to have to be ready for that game. Penn State's going to have to be ready as well. Micah Parsons, James Franklin was on Fox Big Noon Kickoff, and he's like, "Yeah, well, we're still talking. We're having good dialogue." It's like, wow, that sounds like some kind of negotiation that isn't going your way. It's like, well, we're having good dialogue. No, you're probably not. And so I guess I would be surprised if he is back. But you're going to have to be firing all guns in proper alignment with that kind of game, week 2. I guess the good news would be that you haven't been exposed to many other teams, and the COVID exposure has been limited, and there's a better chance of having everybody ready for that game. but there's very little margin for error, and it's like right out of the gate, Nebraska, which is fine, but then you go to Penn State, and I don't want to say that's the entire season, but it's half of it.
It's a lot of it. I mean, there are not that many losable games on the schedule for Ohio State. It is, I mean, Nebraska probably not week one. Rutgers is Rutgers. Maryland is Maryland. Indiana, like, yeah, if you get Michael Penix, okay. Illinois and Michigan State, no, probably not. So, I mean, it's really Michigan, Penn State, maybe Indiana, maybe Nebraska makes it interesting for a little while. But if they get through Penn State, odds are very, very good that they have essentially clinched the East at that point, barring like a really shocking upset. Because then they would have to lose twice in order to fall behind Penn State. And I don't really see, I mean, we have said a bunch of times that this is a year when you're going to have as many crazy results as you can remember. I mean, this is the year that I would not pick anyone to go undefeated this year. I don't think that's going to happen. I think there's just too much variability, too much in flux, too many things that could go wrong in any given week, from guys testing positive to just, it's a weird short season. Everyone's schedule's a little off. Like, it's always dumb to pick people to go undefeated. I think it's particularly dumb to pick people to go undefeated this year. But if they get through that Penn State game with a win, I don't see them losing twice. And so therefore they almost certainly win the East at that point. So that I think is I'm going to just go ahead and say it. I think Ohio State Penn State is a pretty important game this year.
Oh, write that down, Tom. I'm looking at Penn State's schedule, and it ain't easy. They open at Indiana and then Ohio State. Week 4, they go to Nebraska, which is, that's a possibility. Week 5 at home against Iowa is always, anytime Penn State and Iowa get together, you don't know what's going to happen, and something bad could happen there. And then it's at Michigan, then at Rutgers, and then they end at home against Penn State or Michigan State for the old land grant trophy may not even be in existence anymore. They may have tried to put that away, but I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if there's 4 Penn State losses. I'd be surprised. I wouldn't be shocked.
I'd be surprised if there were 4 Penn State losses. I think there are 4 possible Penn State losses on here. Iowa at home versus Iowa in Iowa City are 2 extremely different things. That's one of those teams that the home versus away splits there are pretty remarkable. Iowa at Penn State doesn't really scare me that much from a Penn State perspective. At Indiana week 1, like we have seen week 1, like you're going to have some weird stuff happen probably week 1. I mean, there's always a lot of variability that first week. I think this year there's going to be even more so. Someone's getting upset week 1. I think you're going to have at least one major team in the Big Ten lose week 1. And, maybe that's Wisconsin losing a stupid one to Illinois, or Penn State losing a stupid one at Indiana. I mean, Michigan plays at Minnesota. I don't even know if that would be an upset if Michigan lost at
Minnesota losing that stupid game to Michigan.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, that's dangerous. That's a little bit of a, it's a look ahead spot for them. It's on the road. It's in Bloomington. Indiana should be pretty good this year. That's a danger spot for Penn State. And, then Ohio State. Then you've got Maryland at home. Okay, that's a gimme. At Nebraska is not the easiest game in the world. I think Nebraska is probably going to be decent this year. That's a losable game. You get Iowa at home, and then at Michigan. And, I mean, those are, we'll say 4.5 losable games out of the first 6. I mean, that's not easy. And then they finish up with the kind of easy stretch there. But yeah, I mean, Penn State has, I think Penn State loses 2 games at some point this year. And so if Ohio State loses at Penn State, it's not the end of the world if they win out, because I think Penn State could still lose those 2 other games. But if Ohio State wins at Penn State, I think it's almost impossible for Penn State to win the division at that point.
Yeah, and let's get back to the Ohio State schedule because we've avoided it long enough. Rutgers, week 3, at Ohio State, a good opportunity for C.J. Stroud and Jack Miller and Gunnar Hoke and J.P. Andrade and everybody else to get some action at quarterback for the Buckeyes. But still, Justin Fields needs to put up some numbers. You know, he's got that Heisman to worry about. You've got starters play one half in that game, and you just work on that depth and get everybody some action because you never know who you'll need when you'll need them. And gotta stay rested and healthy for that trip to Maryland the next week, and we'll see how that goes. I think Ohio State will be favored in both. Tom, you?
Against Rutgers and Maryland?
Yes.
You're remembering the Maryland games on the road, right?
Favored by 3, over under 162.
I think it was our buddy Bill Landis who called that the Jim Delaney Gauntlet, which whew, that's should print up some T-shirts. That is a what's the opposite of a murderer's row? It's like a hugger's row. Like, oh, come here,
come here, you little scamp. Yeah, so that's week 3, week 4, Rutgers and Maryland, and then you get Indiana at home, which you have to take seriously because Indiana's Indiana. They've got Michael Penix, as you said. They're Tom Allen has defensive knowledge, doesn't always have the players for it, but I don't think anybody takes Indiana lightly anymore. They don't take the Hoosiers for granted. I certainly don't do it on the road, and you know they're an annoying team that just if you're not ready that day, then it can be a 4-quarter game. And you know this whole stretch, these 3, gosh, even this entire schedule, what am I talking about? Is it going to be a test for Ohio State to maintain their focus? You know, we talked a couple of days ago, or maybe yesterday. I think we talk every day, Tom, about how focused this team is going to be. The schedule is going to test that with the Rutgers and Maryland, and you know, Ohio State knows they're so much more talented than Indiana, but you still have to. If you don't execute, then you won't look as talented as you think you are, and I think it's good for the Buckeyes that one's at home. Gives them a little bit more leeway. But at game 5, they should be just all cylinders at that point.
You would think. I mean, the nice thing about an 8-week schedule is it's like when you took summer quarter classes. I don't know if you ever took summer quarter classes at Ohio State, but it was like they had these like real short, you could do like half a summer class, and it was like you took all the crap you really didn't want to take, and you just did it in these like half summers. So it was like 4 or 5 weeks, and like you just kind of held your nose and went to whatever it was, you know, English literature class or, you know, physics or astronomy or like whatever you didn't want to take that was just like, I have to take this. The school says I have to take this. All right, I'm just going to get it out of the way. And you just kind of like held your nose and did it for 5 weeks. And then it was like 3 weeks in, you're only 3 weeks in and you're already more than halfway done. Like that's what this schedule is going to be. I don't think it's going to be super hard to keep your focus for 8 weeks because it's okay. Week 1 is week 1. All right, Nebraska, they'll be excited to play. It's week 1. All right, hooray, there's football again. Week 2 at Penn State, shouldn't be a focus issue. Rutgers is about a 6-inch putt. Okay, so they can sleepwalk through that and win that by 30. At Maryland, okay, maybe. And then all of a sudden you're halfway through the schedule and it's like, all right, it's November 21st and we're wrapping up the schedule already. It just, I think it'll be a little easier for them to keep focus. And I don't think focus is going to be a real big issue based on everything we've seen and heard from this Ohio State team and how badly they wanted to play and what they think they are playing for this year. I don't anticipate focus is going to be a big issue for this team either way. But, you know, it's the fact that it's a short season, I think will help a lot with that. And the other thing I think that'll help is you don't have the like true trap game on here where you're going to Nebraska, you're going to Iowa, you're going to Indiana. You know, they have avoided for the most part the middle class of the Big Ten, which has come up to bite them in some of those road games. You know, the at Iowa, the at Purdue kind of games. They're playing a good team on the road at Penn State, and they're playing 3 crap teams on the road at Maryland, at Indiana, or at Illinois, and at Michigan State. So unless Greg Schiano shows up again for that at Maryland game, I don't see a huge a huge bear trap that they're going to step into. They either are going to have a road game that's really very favorable to them, or road games that they can kind of probably sleepwalk through and still win by 17 points.
Why do you have to bring up Greg Schiano in this show? People are in a good mood. You got the schedule, you got the season back, and then you're like, oh, yeah, well, what about Greg Schiano? Remember him?
Seems like a relevant data point anytime we're talking about playing at Maryland and the potential dangers of playing at Maryland. It's only proved to be potentially dangerous once. There was a definite theme to that day.
Fair. You mentioned the summer classes. 2 hours of Spanish 5 days a week in the summer one year, just to get it out so I could graduate. And man, I'm still, I can't conjugate a verb ish, but it is what it is. I got a degree in Spanish. It wasn't Spanish. I'm looking at the schedule. Rutgers, make that a Friday game. You can make it a Thursday. You can make it a Tuesday game. I don't think it's going to matter, but I wouldn't be surprised if Rutgers is on a lot of Friday schedules because you give a team a short week, you better give them a bad team to play. And so maybe that'll be a Friday game. Then we said the talking about the home game against Indiana on the road to Illinois. I assume Illinois will be a little bit better, but I also assume they'll be playing Rutgers in week 9 as they match up in the last place. So yeah, that place is odd for Ohio State. I don't know that it's going to be all that odd for Ryan Day and this Ohio State. I don't know that it was ever odd for Urban Meyer. It was just odd for Jim Tressel and John Cooper and those guys, lesser coaches, as we all know. And then the Michigan State game on the road, December 5th. Michigan State by that point will either be a complete train wreck or as good as they're going to be all season. I do have a concern that the following week is Michigan, and who knows what kind of sicknesses the Spartans are going to bring to this game. The following, like on Monday, will there be like 27 Buckeyes testing positive for COVID? Maybe. Sparty, no. We mentioned them on the last show. There's teams that you can't necessarily trust to be disciplined, and hopefully they prove everybody wrong and they have no positives throughout the season, of course. But I think it's a pretty easy lead-in for the Michigan game. Now, at Michigan State has not always been that easy, as we know. But just like if you're going to be going to Penn State, do it during a pandemic. If you're going to go on the road at Michigan State the week before Michigan, do it when there's the Spartans are at like a low point, new transition, transitioning to a new coach, and who knows what kind of situation they'll be in this year. This is probably the best time to go to Michigan State as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if earlier in the season or later in the season is a better time to get Michigan State. My inclination would be earlier in the season because I think they've missed a lot of practice time and they didn't have spring to do any install. I think Michigan State's going to be like historically bad at the beginning of the season. I think where Michigan gets Michigan State in week 2, like I think that's where you want to get Michigan State, like before they have a chance to really do anything and install anything. So later in the year, assuming they can stay healthy, then there should be a better team than they are at the beginning of the year, but they still have talent issues there. And you're still putting in an entirely new system. And they're just, I don't think they're going to have time to be tricky this year. I think they might have time to be competent by the end of the year, but I don't, this is not going to be, one of these previous Michigan State teams that's, doing these really clever things and putting in all sorts of stuff they have never used ever before against Michigan, or super disciplined. Everyone knows exactly what they're doing, kind of defenses like they had under Mark D'Antonio. I think this is just kind of going to be a transition year, and yeah, they'll be better at the end of the year than they're going to at the beginning, but they're still probably not going to be very good.
Yeah, super tricky, like starting a backup quarterback in 2015. Which was super tricky. No, what I'm saying is if you're going to have to go on the road to Michigan State, do it during a year where they've got a new program, and it's because the previous coach got retired. I'm sorry. Retired.
You said the quiet part out loud there. That does seem like, I mean, do you remember the last time we went up there? I mean, we talked about it earlier, real cold, but also it was just Ohio State basically figured out very early that Michigan State was going to get 6 and only 6 and exactly 6 points. So as soon as Ohio State had 7, it was like, well, unless we accidentally snap the ball back through the end zone, they're not going to get to 8. So that was the game where Drew Chrisman was the post-game interview on the field, because Drew Chrisman was such a deadly punter, and Urban Meyer kept punting on the plus side of the 50, and I'm up in the press box going, but what do you do the math? Like, what do you stop punting on 4th and 2? And then Drew Chrisman kept killing it at the 1-yard line, and Michigan. You could have given Michigan State 17 quarters and they would not have gotten more than 6 points in that game. That seems very much like what this game could be. December 12th, probably 20 degrees and cold and probably snowing. And it's going to, that game ends up 24-3. And everyone in the SEC goes, but they only beat them by 3 touchdowns and they're terrible. It's like, okay, if Alabama came up to Michigan State on a day like this, they would turn to dust. So, yeah, there's a couple games at the end of the schedule that just look like, there's going to be 0.0 style points there. Like it's going to be gross. It's going to be unimpressive. And as long as Ohio State wins, it'll probably be fine. But
can they afford to be that unstylish?
If they win the Big Ten, I would say yes. My position on all of this year has been, if Ohio State wins the Big Ten with 1 loss or less, they're probably fine. I don't see the College Football Playoff Committee putting in like a SEC East champion Florida and also an SEC West champion Alabama in a year when it's like this just seems like this is going to be very much just, the eye test year, and they're going to take the sure things that they know, and they know Ohio State and Clemson and Alabama are probably going to be three of the playoff teams, and they'll take whoever wins the Big 12. And I think I am more confident that it will be conference champions only, just to make it as objective a standard as they can, because there's no external data points this year for the most part. So I think if Ohio State wins a Big Ten championship, even if they lose a game and they have some kind of unimpressive games partway through the season, if they beat Penn State and they thump Michigan at the end of the year and they win the Big Ten championship, I don't see them getting left out.
It'll be like when Homer told Marge, women will like what I tell them to like. This is like College Football Playoff Committee. People will like what we tell them to like. And I don't know that you could complain about 4 conference championships. So that leaves the Michigan game. I don't know what else we have to say about Michigan being on the schedule, other than I'm glad it's moved back to the final game, because there's no reason not to, because it's not like you can protect it by putting it in week 3 or week 7 or week 4 or week 2, because you just don't know. It's all kind of up in the air as to who will be available when, and so you just schedule the games, and they are what they are. Tom, let's look at Michigan's schedule real quick before we go, because they open at Minnesota, and I'm not saying that's an automatic loss for Michigan. What I am saying is it's on the road against, I assume, what I assume will be a ranked opponent, and generally those 2 things equal an automatic loss for Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. Road game against a ranked opponent. I think he maybe has, and I could just open up my Phil Steele magazine right now, but I believe it may be like 1 win out of 7, 8, 10 attempts. And this is a pretty big season for Minnesota. There's you got the old jug on the line as well. That's a tough start for Michigan, and I wouldn't be shocked if they start 0-1 at all.
Yeah, that's a possibility. And by the way, our buddy Silent Verbal asked in their questions, he'd like our predictions on Michigan's record. So we will get there. So, if this is one of these things where I feel like I'm going to say this 1,000 times. This is going to be a real weird, unpredictable season, and there's some weird stuff going on with Minnesota, where Minnesota was one of the teams that was most actively like, yep, we shouldn't play this year. Like PJ Fleck said, he talked to 30 players and they all said, nope, we shouldn't play this year. Now, I don't know what that has done in terms of their mentality, in terms of whatever workouts they've had the last few weeks. Has it been, the intensity of the Ohio State workouts and all of that? I don't know. And, Rashad Bateman sounds like he's trying to opt back in. If Rashad Bateman can opt back in, that obviously is a huge, huge bonus for the Gophers. Michigan's got some guys who are trying to opt back in. Nico Collins just opted back out. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of moving parts here. But if Michigan gets, who Michigan has got, Ambry Thomas sounds like he's maybe opting back in.
Jalen Mayfield came back in. Kwity Paye came back in.
Yeah.
So Nico Collins is out again.
Nico Collins, as far as I heard, Nico Collins was out, and Nico Collins he had an agent, and last I heard he was not planning on coming back. So, Mayfield back helps on the offense. I mean, that gives them one returning starter in the offensive line, which is better than zero. Kwity Paye coming back obviously gives them a pass rusher. Ambry Thomas gives them some corner, gives them someone to cover Rashad Bateman, assuming Ambry Thomas and Rashad Bateman are both playing, which again, these are some of the uncertainties we're looking at right now. But yeah, I mean, one returning starter on your offensive line and a road game in week 1 against a solid opponent, like that's probably at best a coin flip for Michigan, I would say. I mean, we'll go through the first 4 weeks. I don't think there's a certain loss among the first 4 weeks for Michigan, but I also only see probably one certain win. There's a lot of 60-40 kind of 50-50 kind of games for them. And yeah, I could absolutely see them losing that first week at Minnesota.
We'll see how good quarterback Joe Milton is with Dylan McCaffrey transferring out and basically quitting because there's no reason for him to leave. He graduates in December. He could transfer somewhere free of charge, after the season. He could just stick around and wait for Joe Milton to get injured behind an offensive line of one returning starter. But maybe he's also seen that offensive line. He's like, no way, man.
Well, you're not losing a season of eligibility either. That's the thing that was like, really?
Yeah. I don't want to be here.
Yeah. Well, and that's it. It's I don't want to be here because it costs you nothing to continue to be there. You're not using a year of eligibility. You're going to be there to finish your degree anyway. Why would you? And there's no guarantee that Joe Milton makes it through the season healthy.
Oh.
And so that was weird to me because again, and Dylan McCaffrey's parents were some who were a little more vocal about the fact that they wanted to play this year. So that was real weird to me. I mean, it's the latest in a long string of that's kind of weird kind of things with the Michigan quarterback position over the last few years. But yeah, that one was like, I don't know how much it impacts him on the field, but that's just kind of a weird situation.
I just realized there's going to be no Michigan quarterback up for the September Heisman because there's no Michigan football in September. This is devastating to me. Tom, I just realized that on the 20th of September or whatever today's date is. So then week 2, Michigan hosts Michigan State, should be fine, should not be a problem, even though it is a rivalry game. I'll still be watching it because it's one of my favorite rivalry games. Although I'm guessing that Penn State game will be a big noon kickoff, and Michigan State might be at 3:30. We'll see, because none of the times have been announced yet either. Then week 3, Michigan at Indiana, which, and we've said this before, eventually Indiana has to get somebody.
Mm-hmm.
They have to beat Ohio State or Penn State or Michigan. They have to get somebody. And they've got Michigan at home, which we'll see. I think a lot of it still comes down to, is Joe Milton good or is he bad? And if he's bad, I don't know that Michigan is going to win this game. If he's good, they may win the game. That's just a really, really interesting one for me. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, that's certainly a team that is, again, if you gave me even money odds, will Indiana beat either Penn State or Michigan or Ohio State this year? I would probably take the yes. Just a straight up yes/no bet. I would probably take the yes. They are going to get someone this year. They have a good enough team. You got Michael Penix back. I mean, I think Ohio State fans look at Indiana and go like, them? Because you remember them last year just looking terrible against Ohio State. Well, number one, Ohio State was very good last year. Number two, Michael Penix wasn't playing in that game. That changes things a little bit for Indiana. You get a little bit more of the chaotic, multi-talented runner and passer at quarterback, and that changes what that offense looks like a little bit. And the defense is okay, and they get Penn State and Michigan at home. I mean, I think Indiana gets someone this year, and again, very much like the Minnesota game, it's early enough in the year. I think it's going to take Michigan a while to get things together. New quarterback, 4 new offensive linemen. You've got they're going to have some good running backs, but what are the running backs going to look like if the offensive line is terrible? And, the offensive line will probably ultimately be okay because Ed Warner's a pretty good offensive line coach, but it's going to take a little while. They didn't get spring ball to do it. They have had, the very limited fall camp like Ohio State has. So you're trying to throw together a brand new offensive line this year. This is not the year to have to put together a brand new offensive line. This is the year you want the Ohio State offensive line where you functionally got, three returning starters and a couple guys who have also started or played significantly before, and you can just kind of like put everyone in and go. That I think last year, I think Michigan's defensive line was the one that I think everyone, especially us, if you go back and listen, said, that's going to be a problem. They're going to lose some games because they don't have defensive tackles. That's actually an important thing. And this year, I think they're a little better defensive tackle, but now it's offensive line. And it's like, well, okay, they've got running backs, but you also don't have an offensive line. And now you've lost your best wide receiver in Nico Collins. You don't have Tariq Black anymore. They get Chris Evans back. You got Zach. Yeah, you've got lost Donovan Peoples-Jones. Yeah, you've got Zach Charbonnet. Yeah, you get Chris Evans. But I mean, you have seen, I'm sure at some point in your life, good running backs just running into the back of the line and there's no hole there. And it's like, well, you can fall forward for 2 yards, but when you're running into people right at the line of scrimmage, you fall forward for 2 yards and you get 2 yards. And that, you do that 4 times and you turn the ball over. So that doesn't work out real well. So yeah, I'm right with you. I think I would be fairly surprised if Michigan made it to 3-0, that they didn't get bit at least once between at Minnesota and at Indiana.
Indiana, and I'll jump over real quick to Indiana because I think the first portion of their schedule is interesting because they open at home against Penn State, then they go to Rutgers for a rest on the road, then it's home against Michigan. So it's like they've got some opportunities here to snag somebody. It could be week 5, it could be 5-0 Indiana or 4-0 Indiana against 4-0 Ohio State for the Big Ten East, Tom. So don't forget about the Hoosiers. So then week 4, after Michigan goes to Indiana, then they come home and they get the Badgers. The Badgers they've lost Jonathan Taylor. Who knows who the running back is going to be? Will it be freshman Jalen Berger out of New Jersey, who had a bunch of teams after him? We'll see. I assume it's going to be somebody who ends up rushing for like 1,500 yards out of nowhere, and he's really, really good. Certainly by week 4, they'll have somebody probably on the cusp of 1,000 yards right then. Getting them at home, even though I think the whole home road thing has, like, it used to be maybe like create like a gap like this. I think it's shrunk quite a bit, and it's not as important as it used to be. But you'd still rather be playing at home, simply because it's the routine that you're used to. So I think Michigan by that point should be okay, but I'm still not gonna assume this Michigan defense is going to be able to handle what could be a good Wisconsin running game and a decent play action team. But I'm probably leaning Michigan there just because it's home and it's a month into the season, and they should know everything they need to know about who they are and what they can do.
Yeah, the further you get into the season, the more you think probably the offensive line is going to be coming together more. The offensive line is probably better. You're probably developing some sort of wide receiver threat somewhere. You gotta, someone has to be out there running those routes at some point, and you would assume that with reps they would get better. Joe Milton, same deal. I assume that the further you get into the schedule, Michigan, much like Michigan State, Michigan's a team you want to get early this year. And so the further you get into the season, the more confident you would be that they will probably beat at least decent teams. But again, this is another one of these coin flip games where, yes, Michigan's a better team, but also Wisconsin's probably still the favorite in the West. I mean, Wisconsin or Minnesota in the West, and I I don't know how confident I am that Michigan beats them. I think they have 3 games in those first 4 weeks that are probably, 50-50, 60-40 kind of games where, I mean, we as soon as the schedule came out 4 weeks in, you're texting me. It's like, is Michigan going to go 1-3 this year? And it was like, Michigan could start 1-3, Michigan could start 4-0, and neither would completely shock me. But they have losable games. And again, with as much uncertainty as I think there is this year, I think it's much less put a W or put an L on the schedule right now as how many losable games do you have? And they have 3 losable games in the first 4. And, they probably don't lose all 3, probably, but a 1-3 start there, a 2-2 start there, they could, if they're 2-2, say they lose those 2 road games and then beat Wisconsin, they've beaten Michigan State, they've beaten Wisconsin. Those are 2 big wins, and you're already basically functionally out of the Big Ten East race.
Well, Tom, if they are 1-3, week 5 they go to Rutgers. If they're 1-3, they're going to be completely checked out. And this is a checked out Michigan team coming into Rutgers, who at that point will be, Rutgers is on the road to Michigan State, home to Indiana, on the road to Ohio State, home against Illinois. Could be coming off of a big win over the Fighting Illini. Sky high at 1-3 on the year, or who knows? Maybe they steal a win at Michigan State. Sky high Rutgers 2-2, hosting a 1-3 Michigan team that we know will have checked out at that point, because that's what There's no point in fighting, because what's 5-3 going to do for you? So that could be the biggest win in the Greg Schiano new era since the win over Louisville in 2006 or whenever it was. So I'm not saying Buckeye fans should be rooting to see Michigan go 1-3 just to see how they do at Rutgers, because I know you won't. I know they won't be. They'll be wanting Michigan to show up Rutgers at 4-0 and just run through the Scarlet Knights, because you want Michigan to be, as we say every year, you want Michigan to be 7-0 when they come in, when that Ohio State game is played. But anyway, go be a 1-3 Michigan going into Rutgers, which I don't think would happen. But the psychology involved there would be interesting to watch. And then they've got Penn State at home, and now again we get back to the real part of the schedule for Michigan, where they do at least get a break before the Ohio State game. They have Maryland, and so. Yeah, the closing of Rutgers at Rutgers, then Penn State at home, then Maryland at home, and then Ohio State on the road. You get a week of buffer between Penn State and Ohio State, which Michigan should be thankful for, but they'd probably still be too busy cussing out the Big Ten for giving them Minnesota and Wisconsin as the interdivisional rivals there.
Yeah, that's they didn't get an easy schedule, and that was something Pete Thamel tweeted out, that unlike the SEC, the Big Ten did not just give the top of their conference just the absolute dregs of the other division, cross division. I mean, they Ohio State has Illinois, and okay, they're not good, but there is an easier draw than Nebraska this year. So yeah, I think that's fair. I'm real interested to see the Michigan Penn State game. That's Thanksgiving week. As I tweeted, it's great to see the Big Ten preserving 2 traditions this year, having Ohio State and Michigan wrap up the season, and also having Michigan lose on Thanksgiving weekend. I think those are two important parts of conference tradition that they got to preserve this year. So that's important. I think there are, you go through that Michigan schedule and it's like, how many games are you really, really confident that they win? Bet your life confident that they win. I would put Michigan State on that list. I would put at Rutgers on that list. I would put Maryland on that list. That's it. That's not great. I mean, because then you've got 5 coin flips, and odds are you're going to lose 2 to 3 of those coin flips. So,
well, is the Ohio State game even a coin flip?
Well,
technically, I guess,
technically, yes, it's a lose. It's a losable game. They're probably underdogs by 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns. 17 points, something like that. that's going to be, you figure you probably put in the Ohio State game as a loss. I probably have that Penn State game as a loss. And then, Wisconsin, Indiana, Minnesota, you lose at least one of those. I think you're looking at 5-3 and 4-4 is not like completely out of the question. And I mean, like you said, if they're 1-3 or even 2-2 after those first 4 games, and then you've got the sandwich game at Rutgers before Penn State, Rutgers is gonna be so bad this year, so bad. But that could be a week that, that Michigan game is 6-3 in the second quarter, and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh!" And then and then they win 27-3 or something. But there's nothing about a 2-2 or 1-3 Michigan team having to go on the road to Rutgers the week before Penn State. So you kind of have that look ahead, but you also have the disappointment of the week before, and there's nothing about that suggests this is going to be a great performance.
Yeah, we should probably get to wrapping up so everybody can get to football here shortly. I just want to say I feel like I'm almost chalking up that Minnesota win over Michigan and Inc. It just feels like that's going to be a win for the Gophers and a way to start the season out right. Anything else from the schedule that jumped out at you that you want to touch on before we go?
I think we've done a good first run through. I have a feeling we'll get to talk about this a lot more next week, and probably have some additional insights when we've had a little more time to digest things. I've kind of forgotten who's on every team at this point. Like I said, we haven't really been talking about football for a while, so I've got to kind of refresh my memory on some depth charts, and especially on the west side of the conference.
I know more attorneys and governors than I do quarterbacks right now in the Big Ten, and that's an odd feeling. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. Enjoy your Saturday of football if you are watching live or listening, and just have a good weekend. We will talk to you guys much later.